Welcome to Leadership for Startups, where we help entrepreneurs and leaders build businesses that grow and flourish. My name is Toyo Shimbi, your host. Welcome to episode 18. My guest today is Nick Frost. Nick is the co-founder of CRMG. He has been involved in cybersecurity for over 20 years. Prior to starting his own business, he has led leadership roles in PricewaterhouseCoopers. He has started his first company in 2015 and has just started CRMG in 2018 with a colleague. He has 3 boys. Is a big Liverpool supporter. Well, Nick, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I like the introduction.
Well, let's sort of get this concern that some people might have out of the way. Being a big Liverpool supporter might cause some struggles.
Yeah.
So, how big would you describe yourself as a Liverpool fan?
Well, I must admit, I'm now that they're sort of top of the league and they're doing well. Obviously, I'm one of the biggest supporters in the country. No, I've always been a Liverpool supporter, but the season is a great one, and
it's a great one to be a Liverpool supporter.
Yeah.
All right, so let's just sort of disclosure that I'm sure even if you are not a Liverpool fan, I'm sure there's a lot of advice that we can take from Nick today. So grateful to have you on today's podcast. So let's sort of start off with a bit of a background. How did you end up where you are today?
Well, I suppose that's a good question. I think if I go back to, I suppose I started my career in a totally different field to cybersecurity. My background is geophysics, so I worked for an oil company for 4 or 5 years, spending a lot of time, trying to locate oil and gas around the North Sea and other parts of the world. And the company I worked for at the time, a company called Schlumberger, they set up a joint venture with another company to, this is in the late 90s, to provide internet services, as it was called back then. And the first project I had was actually what was probably called IT security then. I don't even think the term cybersecurity existed. And that was really my entry into this whole field, which, even back then was really all about firewalls and intrusion detection systems. And, it was really real sort of pioneering stuff at the time. So that was the first sort of, step into the field of cybersecurity.
And obviously, you've led different leadership roles within large organizations, and now you own your own company. So what would you say is the difference between being a leader in a large organization, such as, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and then running your own company?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. I think when you're in a leadership role in a big company, you do have, there's pros and cons. You do have an element of comfort. You've got, there's a lot of support mechanisms in place when you're in a large company, such as PwC. And I think also, I've got a lot of great things, had a great experience at PwC. And I think fundamental to a lot of people in any role in PwC is you get a lot of very good training. And, they invest heavily in training, whether you're in a technical role, whether you're in a managerial leadership role, whatever it may be. And so, I was quite fortunate in many ways that, that I'd had a lot of that sort of formal training, if you like, that could then transfer quite easily over to running your own company. However, running your own company comes with a whole range of different sort of rewards and challenges. So I would say that the biggest differentiator in terms of a leadership role is that when you're running your own company, the level of responsibility you have is, it's far greater than when you're working for an organization. I mean, that's an obvious thing to say, but it really is true. So that to me would be the big differences.
Yeah. So we'll explore a bit more about that, but maybe you can also give us some insight into, talk us about how you went about starting your own venture, and maybe why you wanted to start your own business?
Yeah, sure. I think to be honest with you, Toy, I'd always wanted to, to see what it was like to run your own company. And the time for me in 2015 was definitely the right time to do that for a number of reasons. I think also that I had sort of been in information security for, as you say, 15, 20 years by then. So there was you reach a point where you're never going to know everything, but you feel quite comfortable with what you've learned, what you've experienced, both from a technical side but also, managing projects, managing clients, all of those kind of things. So, for me, the timing was right. And I started off, as I say, running initially my own company. And that started to grow very quickly. I'd worked with a colleague of mine, the other co-founder, Simon Rycroft, and it was just a really good natural fit for Simon and I then to create our own company called CRMG. And that was a really good, I think, really good decision both of us have made, because the company itself, CRMG, over the sort of 2 years or nearly 2 years it's been in existence, it has grown very quickly. And quite often, I mean, everyone's different, but quite often finding somebody you can bounce ideas off, who's got an equal level of commitment involved, it's important, because, with a successful company, it's great when you see it grow, and it's great when you see more business coming through. But at some point, you've got to scale up, and you're going to face, greater rewards, and at some points greater risks, and you've got to try and manage that between both of you.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, as you know, we'll have a lot of our audience will be either in the same situation where they're just about starting off. And so what were some of the risks that you had to factor in making this decision?
Yeah, I think, I think in terms of, I suppose in terms of the company growing, I think, ultimately your company is going to be heavily defined by, both, the leaders, if you like, or directors, myself and Simon, but also the people that you're bringing on board. So, and that's where sometimes the challenge can lie, because you're under a lot of pressure to bring on people to, deliver a particular project, a particular service. But ultimately, you've got to find the right people in what can often be quite a short period of time. So, that's a challenge any organisation will face. It's certainly a challenge that that we've seen in the early days. And it's like everything, you get far better at it. You become more selective, and you've got a good idea about the types of people you want to bring on board. And I think ultimately, Simon, myself, and other other members of the team are getting better at identifying the right people. And I think any sort of advice that's probably, I suppose, one of the key factors that I've learned about people is, number one, understanding whether you're bringing on the person that you think is going to create the right chemistry, both within the team and with the client. Technical skills absolutely are essential. You've got to have someone who's going to, have a real good focus and knowledge of the subject. Secondly, has a commitment to delivering quality. Quality is something that's absolutely vital for us at CRMG. And then thirdly, is this individual going to, is going to be able to create that right sort of chemistry with the client. And there are lots of, we can probably explore what that chemistry piece actually means, because there really is quite a lot to it that we often just, we just accept is a normal part of doing business, but it's fundamental.
Yeah. Yes. So I guess what might be coming to some people's mind is starting a business. The first thing, you need customers, and because you haven't got a business, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, how was it for you? Are you able to sort of talk us through the process
sure.
you went through? I mean, for instance, were you funded, or was there some kind of cushion that you had some money so that you weren't under any kind of pressure initially? I mean, what was the situation for you
Sure.
in the very beginning?
Yeah, sure. No, we've not had any funding, no investments at all. We've basically formulated, I suppose you could say, partnerships. We have some partnerships with organisations that one is called the ISF, the Information Security Forum. It's probably the leading forum organisation for developing best practice in information security. It's very well respected and regarded. So we work very closely with them. We're their consulting partner. We've also established partnerships with Computer Futures and S3, and of course a company called Galvanize. So it's all on our website. But these are organisations that that are known as leaders in their particular fields. And I think also, these are organisations that are highly regarded, and quite often there's a nice synergy that we've created with them, and also with their particular clients. So the way it really worked was, it started off really with the Information Security Forum, who develop and create a lot of this leading best practice in information security. And a lot of their members, their clients, wanted to have qualified individuals to be able to implement this. So that's really where this came from, and we became the consultancy partner to implement a lot of their products and frameworks that they produce. And that naturally has grown over the few years we've been doing this. And with companies like Galvanize, for example, they're a known GRC vendor, and they have a huge number of clients. And ultimately, a lot of those have consultancy needs as well. So that sort of working relationship we have with these organisations does start to create some great opportunities.
So partnership. I mean, it's interesting because I can see that it's very easy to get on well with you. I mean, we've started to speak for about 2 months now. Were there any particular skills that you either had to develop or utilize that you weren't using when you were working for PwC, for instance, or in the bigger firm, that as an entrepreneur that you had to sort of utilize in creating these partnerships?
Yeah, that's yes, there are. I think at heart, I've probably always been a bit sort of entrepreneurial, and I say that in the sense that if I see an opportunity, I tend to sort of run towards it. In some of these big organisations, don't get me wrong, they do nurture that entrepreneurial spirit, but there's always a sort of there's always that sort
red
of
tape.
Yeah, there's always that counterbalance, whatever you want to call it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so that and for the right reasons, because they ultimately their game is an organisation of that size. You're talking about an element of managing business risk. So, but to your particular point, I think the skill set there was more about releasing a skill set that had been maybe sort of tempered slightly. And then, of course, when you start your own company, yes, there's a lot of freedom you have, but at the same time, you've got to make your time count, because we didn't have funding, for example. We didn't necessarily need it. We were lucky in the sense that we got off to a great start with these partnerships, and we were able to sort of maximize the work that was coming through from these partnerships.
So are you able to put some kind of name on that skill set, or names?
Well, I think if I take a look at I suppose both the skill set that I have and Simon has, Simon Rycroft, the co-founder, I think it's important that that we that we consider that joint skill set. Certainly mine is very much. I love to try and solve problems. That's really what I get a buzz off. And I can quite often go into organisations and just get a sense and diagnose the issue that they're facing. And quite often it's not always the immediate issue the client's telling you. I think that's one of the key things about, coming up with a solution is, it's often worth spending 8% of your time figuring out the problem. And then, the solution sometimes, not always, but sometimes, naturally materializes. So for me, the skill set that I think, is key, that I bring to the table is the desire to solve problems and to come up with innovative solutions that make practical sense. There's a clear logic, because at some point, either your client's got to understand it or your client's boss has got to understand it. So it's really important to be able to articulate that in whatever way you need to. And I think, so that's one of the skill sets that I think I bring to CRMG. Simon definitely has the business acumen. He's done a lot of the work I've done, but he's very much got the focus on understanding and looking at the strategy for CRMG, and looking at how we can better coordinate a lot of the jobs, a lot of the partnerships, and really, both of us looking at where CRMG is going into the future.
So a bit of strategic, and then the relational problem solving.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And one of the nice things I think that we hand on heart can say is that 99% of the times we're able to we get a lot of repeat work as well from the clients, and that's really nice because there is a balance though. I think it's important that you can get a bit too close to the client, and I think that's it's important to note that you still always have to remind yourself you're in that advisory capacity, because what you don't want to do is you don't want to create a point where at some point you have to disagree or you've got to deliver some bad news, and ultimately that becomes far harder if you've sort of strayed into the friendship, if you like, with a client. So that's an important feature to consider.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that we try to encourage is, first of all, an understanding of the selling sort of process is long term, and so you got to consider that you want it to be a long lasting relationship so they can lead to repeat business. And I think that's, in a way, that's what you're saying. It's more of a consultative, what's called a trusted advisor.
Exactly.
Positioning. Exactly.
That's exactly it. And I think it might sound a bit cliche, but if we can try and make our clients look good, then that really is fantastic. If we've managed to improve the delivery of the project, the perception of the security function, personally improve, or take some headaches away, which is often the case, that's exactly what we're aiming to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's great to know, and it's interesting to see how you're aware of your strengths and also your co-founder's strengths as well, and about how important that is in terms of team building, I guess.
It is. It's the right sort of, it definitely is. If anyone is looking at going into starting their own company, don't get me wrong, I would encourage everybody to have a stab at it, and I'd also encourage everybody to be honest with themselves and say when it's not the right time for them to do it and to do something different. If you're going in with a partner or partners or co-founders, it's often a good idea to look at either the blend of the skill sets. Because if you're both highly focused on, solving problems or, supporting sales or, you're still going to need somebody who's able to deal with a lot of the business aspects. And, you're both going to have to make key business decisions. But it is an important, feature that anyone should consider if you're looking at going into a partnership. Just take a step back and look at what you think the skill sets are needed and simply marry them up to what you can offer. And also what's really going to float your boat, because there are certain things within CRMG I love to do, and there are certain things I'm not that fussed about doing. And luckily, they're sort of a different ends of the spectrum in terms of what I like to do sometimes and what my other co-founder likes to do as well. So,
yes, that makes it easier, doesn't it? Okay, that's brilliant. Yes. Okay, so I want to talk about vision. So, I mean, from your perspective, how important would you say having a clear vision is when starting a business? And if so, how have you gone about creating yours?
Sure. I mean, look, I'm going to be completely open. I think we certainly had a clear vision for CRMG. I think from day one, and that number one was to create an ethical company that was going to really, cut through a lot of the complexity that security functions often face, and home in on what we would say is a risk-based approach to security. Now, that vision suddenly, if I'm honest, got forgotten about, got placed on pause for a bit because we went through a period of rapid growth, huge amounts of work, and we probably the past 6 months we've been revisiting that vision. So we're much clearer now about where we're aiming to go. We've established, 2 additional services in addition to providing consultancy services, and they're maturing very nicely. One is providing a education and basically a certified training course on the standard good practice, which is what the ISF provide. So in addition to consultancy, we're now driving a training program across the world, and the second one is working with Galvanize, a GRC vendor, to develop best practice in helping to create cyber risk assessment modules, cyber security assessment modules. So bringing all our sort of industry experience and expertise, if you like, and working with a vendor to develop these sort of modules and tools to help organizations assess risk.
So based on your experience, then, what's your opinion? Is vision static or is it flexible? I mean, what's your opinion now that as you're evolving on this?
I think, I would say you have to have a vision that fundamentally you've got a foundational vision. But I think you're right. I think you have to consider vision to be dynamic. I'm not saying that our vision has changed at a high level. So if you look at the foundations in terms of what we set out, no, that's still going to be the same. We're still aiming, and we still always will aim to focus on the principles, having an ethical approach to the way we do business, ethical approach to the way we treat the clients, ethical approach to the way we work with our own staff. That's really, really important. And we're quite selective when we come to choosing individuals to work for CRMG. But if you look at the sort of dynamic aspects in terms of the vision, then yes, I mean, you could look at the vision from a service perspective. So 12 months ago, we were primarily focused on providing consultancy. So, and that focused really around the GRC space, the governance, risk and compliance space. So focusing on policies, helping organizations comply, or align themselves much closer to, industry standards, regulation, and helping organizations really understand what their cyber risk profile is as an organization. So all of those aspects, we've got a lot of experience. We've got a lot of good understanding around the processes, how to go about that. And then in the past sort of 6 to 8 months, we've developed this training program, which is actually really, really exciting. It's the first of its kind. It's based on, as I say, the ISS standard of practice, which is, and I'm not just saying this, it is the leading standard for information security out there. And the third part, if you like, the third area is really getting involved with a leading GRC vendor to help them deliver industry strength tools for assessing risk to organizations. So some really exciting services we've created in a pretty short period of time.
Yeah. And it seems that so from what you just said, that you've gone through some significant growth. Is that right?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I suppose 2 years ago. Go on, sorry.
Yeah, and then it's interesting but with that growth, it also sounds like there's been some challenges, right? So which is sort of like counterintuitive, right? So what are some of the challenges that you've faced within the growth period?
Yeah, I think it's that one of the key challenges I think that anybody will find is I remember quite clearly, sitting back one evening and speaking with a couple of the team, and we were all talking about this great, a lot of work coming through, and then you wake up the next day and you think, right, we've got to deliver this now, and
sounds like your prayer's been answered now.
Yeah, exactly.
You got another problem.
Yeah, that's it. And these are big organizations, so they expect they expect you to be able to deliver in a very short period of time, and they expect you to have a team of people to deploy. And I know all this because having worked for one of the big four, that's what they can do. So you have those kind of challenges. That's when you've now got to accelerate and start to identify the people that are going to be absolutely qualified to deliver this. And what this sometimes tends to do is it's all very exciting, but it tends to occupy a lot of your own thinking. So one of the things that I would try and encourage anybody who's building the business is it's absolutely critical, if you can, easier said than done, but it's absolutely critical to try and give yourself an element of downtime where you can just start to put things in perspective and get that sense of clarity around, all parts of your business. Because, sometimes you've got a project that, a number of projects that are all very exciting and high profile, and they will probably occupy more time than they should. So you need to, you need to try and balance that. Easier said than done, but.
So with this growth, I'm guessing you needed more hands on deck. So one of the challenges that most entrepreneurs or leaders will face while they're scaling up is attracting, selecting, and hiring. I know you talked about chemistry earlier on, so maybe can you tell us maybe some of your own experience, good, bad, ugly, and what you've learned in all those situations?
Yeah, certainly. I think I think when you talk about let's talk about the chemistry piece first, because we tend to focus on people that have been in industry for quite some time. I think the reason we do so is that they've been around, they've managed projects, they've managed clients, they've managed client expectations, they've managed teams, and they know the pitfalls when you're delivering risk assessments or a transformation project or a GDPR project. So that's great. We've got that skill set, and we've got the technical skill set, and we've got the soft skill set, and that's great. So that's one of the things that certainly helped us in the short term. However, it doesn't get away from the fact that as you're scaling up, there ultimately is going to be, more and more of my time, more and more of Simon's time that gets used up. So at some point, you've got to bring in that next layer, and that's a really important layer to bring in, because you have to appreciate that the individual you're bringing in may not think the way you think. Not saying they're not going to deliver as well as we want them to. Of course they will, but you have to be quite selective about the individual that you bring in there, because there's a history of how we work with the team, and this new individual is going to come in, is going to have to reestablish herself with the rest of the team. But we have to do it. There's no other way. If you're going to scale up, and we want to be more strategic in our thinking and on our approach to CRMG, both myself and the other co-founder, Simon. So, naturally, we have to hand over some of this to an equally qualified individual to be able to run with some of these projects.
Mm. And so how have you gone around creating a culture? Because in a way, what you're saying there sounds more like this is how we do things, right?
Yeah.
But at the same time, you're hiring people that are well experienced. They've got their own way of doing things. So it'd be interesting to know, especially in your own unique situation. So how are you developing a culture when you already have people that will have their way of doing things?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I think one of the things that I learned from, especially working at the ISF, the Information Security Forum, was the importance of collaboration. We used to run some really deep thinking projects which you would never be able to deliver as an individual. You just can't. There's no way you can come up with a new approach to assessing suppliers, or looking at how you could comply to this piece of legislation. You have to work as a team. So the good thing, I think, that the nice thing about the culture we've established is very much a collaborative approach. So every project is going to have 2 or more people working on it. That's one of the key things that we always do, for a number of reasons. One, I would say that pretty much everybody in the team would prefer to work with another individual. Yes, they know each other pretty well, but to have the right blend of people, you could have somebody that's good with dealing with clients and managing projects, and you doing the PMO stuff, if you like, and you have somebody else that's happy to get involved in writing policies. It's not a project for everybody. So I think creating that culture and using people and understanding their strengths and their skill sets and what they like to do, because what people like to do, it tends to be 9 times out of 10 tend to be their skill, their strengths. So, if you can spot the client and you can work out which strengths, would so-and-so be able to show and benefit from, and what other strengths do we need in there? Okay, it's a big client. They have their way of working. We have to be fairly flexible. Then you start to create a really nice environment where people are delivering, they're feeling rewarded. It creates a nice vibe and culture. So that's an important aspect, just to invest that time thinking about the client, but also thinking about the team to put forward. I think the other thing that's important is that we have a number of events throughout the year where we all get together as a team, and we spend quite a lot of time looking at projects, looking at what's worked well, what hasn't. And it's a really free, open, environment. There's no naming and shaming or anything like that. And that I've noticed over probably the past 12 months, because CRMG has only been going for 2 years. But over the past 12 months, that has nurtured some real transparency amongst the team that I've not really seen before. And that's great. I think when people start to show, hey, look, I'm a bit vulnerable on this part of this project, ring the bell, shout for help. Fantastic, great. We know when we need to jump in, and we know who can help you and jump in. And and people like to help. So if there's a project that you feel need to invest a bit more horsepower into it, fantastic. 9 times out of 10 people will want to help and be able to to muck in. So
yes,
it does create a good team culture.
And when it comes to you personally, any stories that you can share with our audience around challenges that you faced while building your business?
Crikey, yeah, it was quite. Where do you want to start? I think ultimately the ones that the ones I personally found most challenging is how do we maintain this focus on quality of deliverables? And when I talk about quality deliverables, so let me just take a step back here. I mean, I'm talking about everything. I'm not just talking about the end deliverable, the report. I'm talking about absolutely everything that goes into it. And we don't get it all right all the time, by the way. But, you've got to think about, right, we've got a meeting with a client. Let's get an agenda, because an agenda will set out the structure. When you're sending off your first email, and it's not your first email, but, all your other emails, let's just, this may sound like micromanagement, but if you're clear about what the meeting's about, you've got an agenda, this is not always something that organizations see, big organizations, because, they're running at such a pace that, it's some of the things that often get forgotten. So putting that in place creates an incredible level of confidence and assurance between you and the client. So that gets you off to a good start. The trick, of course, is being able to maintain that, even through times of difficulty, because, pretty much every project at some point, by nature, will face a challenge. No project runs smoothly all the time. And you need to be able to, reestablish and create that level of assurance. So when there's a problem arises, right, we've got to crawl all over that problem, and we've got to work out what we're going to do to fix it as quickly as we can. And that's, that sometimes requires, great focus, great quality, and again, structuring people's thinking about how we're going to bring everything back into the norm.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes a lot of sense. There's putting processes in place, and then, but not it's not legalistically, but this is how we do things. I think that's if I'm correct. That's what you're saying.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, you don't want to stifle creativity, and I've seen that with processes that are just too over-engineered. I think it's just really a reminder, to the team, that if you've got a meeting, get an agenda in place, be clear about what you want to have discussed at that meeting, and have, and sound slightly authoritative in the meeting. What is it we want to achieve? Because you have a limited amount of time to get, multiple people focused on achieving one objective within 30 minutes or however long your meeting is. But you have to get that. Because, key decisions need to be made at the end of that meeting so you can progress with your project.
Yeah. Okay. And still within this realm of challenges, a lot of times, entrepreneurs find the work-life balance challenging. You've got 3 boys. So how have you navigated around this work-life balance, and any advice maybe even for our audience?
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, look, I think the advice I would say is that it's okay if you're occasionally working 7 days a week, because that is going to happen. The trick is to carve out time where you're doing nothing but something that allows you to switch off. It goes back to a point earlier that just having that time to reboot your brain and switch off from work is absolutely essential, because it's a bit like how often can you play your sort of your key players. You can't. Everyone's got to have time off, because when they do have time off, they're refreshed, they come back. And the reason I say that is, and it goes, I suppose it goes back to some of the challenges that I've faced, and anyone with a company will face as well, is that when you're feeling pretty fresh, you face some of these challenges. They're easy. You can deal with it. If you've been working 7 days a week and you're feeling pretty stressed out, you could have a smallest challenge and it looks like Mount Everest in front of you. So it is important. I don't always do it, but I do try and build in some time whereby I'm just taking a day off, long weekend.
Yeah.
They're simple things, but they really do work. They really do work.
Yeah. No, that's interesting. I was just reading a book today, actually, that was talking about it. It's called the 5 a.m. Club, and it's just talking about a lot of entrepreneurs and many successful people. They have a hobby that they can switch off. Winston Churchill used to paint. So many people that you find out, wow, when they get time to do that, but actually it was switching off and going into a different gear.
Yes.
So no, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. So what would be your ultimate dream for the business?
Well, I've got a couple of dreams for the business, and I think ultimately, I want CRMG to be really recognized, not as like the biggest consultancy company, but to be recognized as the go-to place when you've got, really difficult challenges around information security, information risk. I want us to be recognized as an organization that, I suppose, creates an overwhelming level of confidence and assurance within our clients. We are working with clients who have very, often pretty clear defined needs. But also we're working with clients who are also under a lot of pressure. So if we can make life better for those, ultimately that's a real win-win for us. And also create an organization where, and I think we're doing this to some extent today, which is great, but create an organization where people, want to actually come and work for you. We haven't advertised hugely for resources. Word's got around from our existing team, and that's great. And they've helped spot some key individuals. Obviously, we use the likes of Computer Futures, who I've been hugely impressed by. Very, as a recruitment company, I think they clearly understand our needs. They're fairly relaxed as well. They're not that pushy, which is great. You don't always feel you've got to give them something when they phone you up. So that ultimately, the vision that Simon and I are trying to create is an organization that's highly respected and creates a level of confidence across businesses to help address their cybersecurity issues. So that's the outgoing vision, if you like, and the internal vision, is an organization that that individuals not just feel proud to work for, but that really feel like they've got skin in the game and making decisions and contributing to the success of the company. And also, part of this is, I think it's always really important. I think when a company gets to a certain size, and unfortunately, I do feel that this is what a lot of big organizations lose, not intentionally, but it's just the nature of the beast, is that if sometimes if you just took a step back and just think for, what do I think, this person would really like to do, or after you've got to know them a bit and you think, right, that's a really good project for that person, just to prioritize in that order, because if you've got people that are really excited, they're waking up in the morning, they're thinking about the project, they're buzzing about coming in and delivering the project, brilliant. That is a great result to have. And if you can create that culture within the organization, then it just becomes a great place to work.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons for this podcast, is all about hopefully educating more people that in the 21st century, leadership is transitioning into creating servant leaders, people who want to empower their staff, which I'm sure you would know that in the 80s, that was kind of like never heard of.
No, crikey. No, that's right. I mean, I remember, I think observing other organizations, that's right. It was all a bit too macho, which just was completely pointless. But
Gordon Gecko, if you remember.
Oh yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right.
So I mean, so to hear this from you, to talk about creating meaningful work, that's exactly what I see. But it'd be interesting to know what you think. What are your thoughts around future trends? What do you think we should expect to see in the world with regards to business leadership, entrepreneurship moving forward, based on this?
Well, I think, and I'm starting to see it more and more, and I would probably call this what I call situational leadership, because, and what I mean by that is, we can all be leaders, but we're often, more effective at being leaders under certain conditions in a certain environment. I know that I can share my leadership skills far greater when there's a problem, when there's something that needs to be solved. I'm probably not, the greatest leader at and leading the team when things are running completely smoothly. I don't want to sound like I'm looking for chaos all the time. I'm not, but but there are people in the team that that can manage certain situations better than others, and I think that is how I see a lot of recognition. I mean, I first used to hear about this situational leadership in PwC with a lot of the training they used to provide us on leadership, and it's absolutely true. You've got lots of well-known individuals that have demonstrated leadership at certain times, with a conflict, whether there's humanitarian need, whatever it may be. But they're not leaders all the time. You can't be a leader all the time. It's just under certain situations. The trick when you're starting out with this company is knowing who to put in place to be able to demonstrate that leadership, and it might be a couple of days, might be 6 months, but you need to know who's best to place at that point.
Yeah, and I think that's also what's is changing the landscape of our organizations, where it's no longer just a hierarchical kind of structure. Even some of the things that you've mentioned about your away day, everybody can contribute, everybody can share honestly.
Yeah,
and I think that's the kind of leadership that I think we're going to see more of.
I think
forward.
so. Yeah, I really think so. I think I think we can't be, CRMG can't be a completely flat structure as we grow and grow. We have to have people that can manage teams and people that whatever you want to call them, different layers of management, whatever. But what is important is is being completely fair, being completely transparent. But that ultimately that has to come from Simon and I. We are the people that will set the tone for what kind of culture we want to create. But I think going back to your original point about what does leadership look like in the future, I do think it's, as you say, it's going to be, much more collaborative. People are going to be more savvy about, when to use certain individuals for certain situations. And that's, if you go back to any sporting analogy, that's exactly what Liverpool football team do. They look at the team they're facing and they think, right, we need greater defenders, greater tackling, whatever it may well be. And that's sometimes the way, organizations should play it as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, as we begin to wrap up, obviously you're in the cybersecurity business. And I'm guessing that there are certain things that businesses are not aware of. So maybe the question is, what would you want to share with businesses around this cybersecurity whole industry that many businesses are not aware of that they should be?
Well, so I think it's absolutely vital for organizations today to at least consider what a major cyber attack would do to their organization. And when I talk about what a major cyber attack would do, they've got to think of it both in terms of, their operation. Are they able still to operate or operate, at a very basic level? Their reputation, the impact, a major cyber attack or cyber security breach would have in terms of, the regulators being involved, loss of competition. So you have to think of a cyber attack in a business sense, and I think that's one of the key things that we try and do. I do believe we do it effectively, but it's one of the most important aspects of cybersecurity is to be able to translate what a cyber attack, cyber risk would lead to for the organization. And it's not always very easy because naturally everyone goes, well, how much is it going to cost? Well, you can't always quantify how much, negative media press would cost, an organization. But, you can guarantee that your marketing budget's going to go through the roof to try and repair some of the reputational damage that's occurred from the attack. So, and the other aspect is it's not always a bad thing to consider a state of compromise. And what I mean by that is, getting senior individuals in a room and going through some kind of cyber scenario, you've lost, millions of records of personal data, your oil refineries being impacted. And as a result of that, your ability to produce whatever producing is reduced over 3 months by 30%. All of these factors are, unfortunately, today are reality. You only have to look at, some of those big names that have been impacted by these cyber attacks. And it's not because they didn't take it seriously. Of course they did. In fact, some of these organizations I know very well have got, good security in place. The challenge that we have is that the sophistication and capability of the cybersecurity threats today, unfortunately, it does exceed our ability, to manage it. And that's why I think thinking about being in a state of compromise is actually a very healthy thing because it just helps you prepare your response to help minimize impact. I don't want to sound like it's, the sky's falling in, but, we naturally we're becoming, and we're not becoming, we already are hugely dependent on systems, and those systems are often created at a pace, and security is not always considered because security doesn't always naturally provide a return on investment. It's what organizations throw lots of money at, but it's difficult to be able to show the value and benefits from that because what are you doing? You're effectively a bit like a goalkeeper. You're stopping things going, getting past into the organization. So it's a challenge I think all CISOs, heads of security will face, is being able to articulate their worth. But I think one of the things I have seen though, Toya, is over the past few years, senior individuals, senior managers, they now get cybersecurity. They do understand, in most cases, the importance of cybersecurity. The trick now is to try and articulate that specifically to their business.
Well, and that's where you guys obviously come in to help with that.
We do, yeah. I mean, a big part of what we do in our offerings is we have a number of activities and services whereby we help the organization understand what their threat landscape looks like, and we can articulate pretty well in an objective manner, who's likely to attack the organization and what types of techniques are they likely to use. And that's really important, because if you understand where the threat is and the types of threat techniques that be used, that helps to target investment, in certain areas of technology, helps to sort of raise awareness on the things that really matter for staff. It's not an exact science, and you never will have an exact science. But if you go through an element of critical thinking about this and follow the processes that we use, you will be able to remove a lot of the noise and home in on, what those key threats you have to focus on for, minimizing cyber attacks.
Oh, thank you. That's brilliant. So, in terms of if anybody's listening to this and you want to get in touch with Nick, you can contact him on their website, which is crmg-consult.com. This will be on the show notes for this podcast. Just a final question in terms of advice for our audience, Nick. Obviously, we've got entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, people who are currently in their startup phase. Any final words of wisdom that you might want to just share with us?
Yeah, I think you just got to. Well, I think there are a couple of things. I think ultimately focusing on really what matters for your clients. I think it's always very healthy to make sure that you get some good feedback, because even when projects don't always go to plan, it's a little bit like that saying of you learn everything from failure and nothing from success. That's really important. Just there will be projects that work fantastically well, and you should celebrate those. And there'll be other projects that you look back on and think, that didn't go so well. Wish we did a better job. Focus on those as well. I think the key thing is, though, that running your own company, starting your own company, either yourself or with partners, it's hugely rewarding. It's hard work, but I would encourage absolutely everybody to give it a go. I think there's so much you can learn from this.
Wow. Well, it's been a pleasure, Nick, having you today on this podcast. You've shared a lot of your wisdom, all the things that you've mentioned about. What I love about what you've talked about today is that you're trying to build an ethical company where people find their work meaningful. So that's in the internal part of your company, but also is to provide a service of excellence. And, that's what I believe, our cities, our countries, we need businesses that are flourishing in this way, because they're adding value to society. People go to work knowing that they're doing something that's meaningful. They are in an environment that's helping them to be who they need to be. And obviously the business itself is serving a greater purpose. So I really want to thank you for participating today.
No problem.
Thank you very much. So listeners, thanks for joining us. And as I said, you can find Nick's contact details in the show notes at leadershipforstartups.com or any of the platforms that you're listening to this. This is Toyo Shimbi. First of all, I want to thank you again Nick, for being on our show. And I want to thank our listeners, and for me, to your success, and speak to you soon. Bye for now.